Joining me right now is the Coalition to Protect American Workers Executive Director and former Chief of Staff to Vice President Mike Pence. Marc Short is here. Marc, great to see you. Thanks very much for being here. What's your reaction to all of that?
Well, good morning, Maria. I think the reality, of course, is that Americans are feeling the cost of higher prices, whether or not it's putting food on the table or trying to fill up your gas tank. And there's no signal that that's going to change anytime soon. And the reality is that you know as well as everybody else that as the Fed looks to tighten significantly this year, typically that leads to less economic growth. And so we're probably in not just for a period of higher inflation, but ultimately to slower economic growth when we try to solve the inflation problem.
Yeah, I want to get your take on this report I'm looking at. This is from Andy LaPierre from Piper Sandler. And he says, unlike in previous periods of market tumult or a deteriorating economy, if that's what we are looking at, there's a completely different backdrop here that will impact things, and that is that the government has no control or less control in terms of fixing things because of the debt that we have. So we're waiting on your GDP number here, which is going to show a sharp decline in growth. We're going from up 6.9% to up 1.1% for the first quarter. What can you do about it in terms of policy?
Yeah. Well, Maria, I think we actually are facing a situation now where debt to GDP is over 100%, and this is the first time since World War II that you actually have the servicing the debt is going to become one of the highest portions of our federal budget when interest rates begin to go up. The one thing I would disagree with Andy is I do think there's actually policies that can be changed. The reality is you can stop spending so much. When you have trillions and trillions of dollars of deficits, the first time in our nation's history now reaching $30 trillion in debt, the way to fix it is to stop spending so much. So there actually are policy solutions that can help fix the problem.
Yeah, I mean, Andy writes, in terms of a policy response to a potential recession, the federal government is in the worst position to support the economy in many decades. This report just coming out to clients this morning. And now this exclusive on Fox Business, Advancing American Freedom, launching their third phase in a campaign to target Democrats demanding support for U.S. energy independence. There is a new ad which features a woman who fled socialism in Venezuela. She's slamming Biden for considering buying oil from the country's dictator, Maduro. As an oil refinery in Houston becomes one of the latest to close in America, Marc, this speaks directly to policy. But unfortunately, the policy that we're seeing has actually hurt the economy.
Right, Maria. What Alessandra explains in this commercial is that her family fled the Chavez regime, which preceded the Maduro regime, socialist regimes in Venezuela that persecute individuals there. And she fled here to America and has made a life for her family here. But she's saying, yeah, there's an economic problem that we face that could be fixed. But there's also a national security component to this, Maria. And it's not just looking to try to get oil from Venezuela and dictators there. This administration is also trying to get oil from the mullahs in Iran. It's why they're so desperate to strike an Iran nuclear deal to put that oil back on the market. It's why the Saudi Arabians are begging to put more and more oil on the market, and Saudi Arabia won't even return their calls. And so you actually have a national security component to this as well. And one other part of this, Maria, that I think gets less coverage is when you hear Pete Buttigieg and Secretary Granholm lecture the American people, the way to solve this is simply to just go buy an electric vehicle. When that average cost is $52,000 and these guys are being driven around Washington, D.C. in government vehicles with government drivers, what they're failing to explain to the American people is that over 80% of those batteries for electric vehicles are made in communist China. 90% of the rare earth materials made for electric vehicles are manufactured in or harvested in Russia and China. And so the reality is that this is a huge economic crisis, but they're compounding with a national security component too, which is what Alessandra talks to in her commercial.
That is such a great point, Marc, and I'm so glad you made it because, Tammy, we've already seen up close and personal what it means when you start relying on adversaries for something as important as oil or natural gas. You've got the Russians right now, as we speak, blackmailing Poland and Bulgaria, saying, we're not going to send you the natural gas.
Yeah, no oil or gas for them. Marc, great to see you. And this is while the Houston refinery's off and we're going to Venezuela and the mullahs. Just on Monday, the Biden administration stopped and reversed the Trump plan to expand oil exploration and drilling in the National Petroleum Reserve in Alaska, which in 1923 was established specifically as an emergency oil reserve. So he is shutting down that. By the way, in 2019, generated about $56 million in the oil and gas revenue. They're saying it's the climate crisis. And so they're shrinking it down. It's not going to happen while we continue to have this oil and gas problem, the inflation with gas, transportation, and everything else. It almost makes it seem as though this is what they want to do, that they're hobbling the United States deliberately. And in the meantime, you've got, we're all dealing with the inflation with oil that affects thousands of products, not just when it comes to transportation. So this really, I think, signals what the intentions of the Biden administration are. And to say, you know what else is really going to hurt the climate, Maria? Nuclear, even a limited nuclear exchange in Eastern Europe. You want it. You want bad climate. You want global climate change when it comes to global in nuclear winter. That's going to bring it to you, and it's because of these policies.
Final word, Mark, real quick.
Tammy, real quick, couple points. One is just this month, Democrats in Congress were lecturing producers and Americans saying, why won't you commit to producing less fossil fuels? So, I mean, their policies are driving this. And to Tammy's point, you actually heard Jen Psaki say, we hope that this energy crisis will get people to shift to renewable fuels and electric vehicles. It's what they want.
Exactly.
They're driving this policy.
Yeah. Yep. All right. We will leave it there. Great conversation, guys. Thank you so much. Marc Short, always a pleasure. We will see you soon. Thank you, Mark. We'll be right back. Stay with us.